and I'm going to start it and turn it over to our next speaker, Catherine Guiley, who spoke at my 4-day virtual summit. And hi, Catherine. Tell everybody where you're calling in from.
So hi, Tony, and everyone watching, and if you're watching the replay, welcome as well. I am here in Sun Valley, Idaho. I'm so happy to be here. I actually just got in from Telluride, Colorado this morning, so just in time to be on the summit, so I'm so happy to be here.
Woohoo! Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get off the camera. I'm going to mute myself. Everyone, please mute yourself. I'm going to try and... Ari, I can't mute you, but if you can mute yourself, that would be terrific. I appreciate it. Everybody else, mute yourself as well. And there we go. Okay, and Catherine, take it away.
Again, thank you so much, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here. The universe made sure that I got here on time, and I'm all fresh from my trip out to Colorado, and so happy to be back in Sun Valley. A lot of people think of Sun Valley as the home of Ernest Hemingway. That is where he did a lot of his writing, as well as he raised a family here and he did a lot of fishing. So I've actually written 6 books in the 5 years. It's now 6 years that I've been here in Sun Valley. There is something about the energy. I think that was in one of the last questions. There's something about the energy of being in a writer's community, and I will be talking a little bit about that in my presentation. So I'm so excited to be with everyone today. Again, I'm the author of 6 books, and I actually have a consulting and coaching practice called Make Publishing Fun. Because as you heard from the 11 tips that Tony just provided, there's a lot to do with writing a book and then marketing a book and doing all the things that happen after you write a book. So it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time. And one of my philosophies in life is that if you're going to put a lot of time and work and effort into anything, you really need to find the fun. I believe that that is really the ticket out of burnout, is to find ways to have fun in what you're doing when you're spending a lot of time on something. So my presentation is going to be the 3 tips to make publishing fun. And I think it's great. I'm so excited to be following Tony because his 10 or 11 tips were really great for people to just get that kick in the pants, to get going and get writing and get that momentum going, but also be thinking about the fact that once the book is done, your journey doesn't necessarily end. There's a lot. You're actually oftentimes at the starting gate when your book is launched, because really the work is in the marketing and the publicity for the book. Speaking of publicity, I have actually had the honor of being with my books on major television stations. I've been on ABC, on CBS, I've been on NPR, I've been on hundreds of radio shows and podcasts. And I really love having a book as a way to weave in stories. It's not about the book when you're on the publicity or you're on the radio show or on TV. It's about adding value to the audience. And again, that's why I'm going to get into these 3 tips to make publishing fun for you. So hopefully you are here because you're an aspiring author. Maybe you have books already, like some of us. Maybe you want to figure out how to do your next book in a more effective time and money way. And that's really what I'm going to be focusing on, is how that you can make your publishing journey. As Tony said, there's not a lot of money in books themselves today. It's really in the speaking and the other back end things. So how can you create a really high quality professional book without breaking the bank and just spending 10 years on it, right? I do actually have a friend who's been working on a book for 10 years. So I hope in the next 25 minutes or so that I can walk you through these 3 steps, and again, with the aim to save you tons and tons of time and money. And on that, before we get into the 3 secrets, I want to tell you I did a survey. I'm in a lot of author groups, and I did a survey of dozens of authors across hybrid, self, and traditionally published authors. And I'll be talking about what that means. Basically, it's the different publishing models of getting your book to market. I surveyed dozens and dozens of authors across these areas to find out how much money they invested in different parts of their publishing journey, what their happiness factor was, what their return was, what the result was. And I'll be offering this survey results to you later in this talk. But what I learned is that there are a lot of sad stories. I didn't know if it was true. I had heard some horror stories, like one of my friends in a mastermind, she actually had to declare bankruptcy because she spent so much money on the editing and editing and editing. And Tony talked about like give up on perfection. A lot of times for us, we as writers, we get so caught up in editing and making it perfect and doing 5 different covers and then doing 5 more. This all costs time and money. And this particular person ended up going into bankruptcy because of her efforts on a book. So again, that's the not fun part that I want to help you to avoid. So hopefully I've got your attention here with the fact that I heard these stories. I wanted to find out if they were true. Is there really this much pain in the industry with authors? And my author survey indeed showed that there are a lot of suffering authors out there. And I believe that these secrets will really help for you to avoid them. So the number one mistake that authors make, and this is the secret number 1, is just jumping into the industry with 2 feet. And what Tony was talking about as far as just get down, sit your butt in the chair and get your book done, I think that's great. I think writing has a lot of different benefits: therapeutic, cathartic, clarity. There's a lot of reasons to write. But when you actually are thinking about getting your book out there, you really, the biggest mistake that I saw people make is they didn't first understand the industry. Now, I come from a background in management consulting. I've worked with huge corporations like AT&T and Motorola and IBM and AT&T. And I will tell you, as I went from one client to the next and project to project, I wouldn't just show up at the client and try to understand what they were facing without understanding the industry first, because every industry has its own set of forces and dynamics. And it's really important for you as an author, as you get into the publishing industry, to understand how it works. So the number one mistake that I saw people make is they didn't figure out how the publishing industry works. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information that I think will help you so that you don't fall what I call prey to predators out there. There are a lot of people now, because 80% of the American population wants to write a book. There are a lot of people, companies that are out there pitching services that really aren't really providing a lot of value for what they're charging. I call those predators in the industry. So we have to be very careful of those. And here's how to do that. I mentioned in my introduction that I just got back from a conference in Telluride, and there was a speaker there from the military. He was a Navy SEAL. It was fascinating. It was a talk about leadership. And he talked about the OODA loop. And I'm going to tell you very quickly what that is. It's OODA. And the first step is that you must observe, then you orient, then you decide, and then you act. And I want to be clear that it's not about like observe, 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 and then like you take a long time, and then you orient, and then you decide. It's not about delaying action. In fact, what he was saying when he was in combat, this OODA loop actually comes from, I think it's Colonel Boyd. From the 70s. It was a way that he trained fighter pilots to get in the minds of their who they were in combat with, and make faster decisions, but make good decisions. And the way to make good decisions is to first observe, right? You don't just like blindly walk into a situation, to a room, without really getting your bearings. And so that's part of the publishing industry. Like, who's in the publishing industry? I'm going to talk about the different players. What is a hybrid publisher? What's the self-publishing model? What are traditional publishers? So you first observe, and then you orient. And so you say, okay, well, where do I stand relative to everyone else? Do I want to be a traditionally published author? Why? Why would I want to do that? What's normal and what's abnormal in that part of the industry? That's the orientation, you to the industry, so that you get a sense of where you stand. Then you decide, and then you act. That's the OODA loop. And he said, in combat, it's really about making that loop a very tight one. But what I want to emphasize here is that you don't just jump into the publishing industry and just assume that you're going to land in the right publishing model with the right partners, with the right model. You really have to orient yourself and observe before you make your decisions and actions. So that's where I'm going to get into next with secret number 2, and that's the basic publishing models. So a lot of people are self-publishing today, and a lot of people are doing hybrid publishing, and fewer are doing traditional. So I'm going to first describe what those mean. I'll start with traditional. That's about 1% of the population. You need a huge platform to be accepted by a traditional publisher. What it means is that they give you an advance for your work. They take care of all of the costs of the book development, and you're usually in a contract. And so you have to provide your manuscript and follow up on any action items that are part of your contract. And in return, they do things for you. And the key that I've learned in observing and orienting in the traditionally published authors group that I surveyed is, interestingly, this was the least happy group. And I think that, I don't know, people are probably like, really? This is like, isn't this the brass ring? Like, get a traditionally published deal, you get an advance. And well, I think what it comes down to is that satisfaction is the difference between what your expectations are and what the reality are. And I think with today, traditionally published firms or traditional firms have less money to spend on each author, and they're doing less on the marketing and publicity side. And they're really kind of saying, okay, author, you've got to take it from here. And so authors, I have a lot of authors in my survey that were really upset about what their publisher hadn't done for them, had or hadn't done. There was a couple of examples where it was in the contract that the publisher had the rights to the audiobook, but they wouldn't produce the audiobook. So the author actually had to buy back the rights to the audiobook, which was crazy, in order to do the audiobook. There was another example in my survey where a traditionally published author had to buy back the ebook rights because they said, oh, no, that was never part of our contract. We just gave you, we put the book out into the marketplace and in its physical form, either soft cover or hardcover, and we did our job. So I think it's important to understand when you're looking at the different models is how you are, again, this is the orientation part, how you like to work with your partners. And having really clear expectations is key. And with a traditional model, you do have a contract. So if you're going to go that way, just read that contract carefully. Get a lawyer to help you because that was really what was driving the dissatisfaction in that group of authors. So then I'm going to go the other end of the spectrum, which is the self-published authors. I think of that as more of the entrepreneurial model. In fact, self-publishing is such a misnomer because self-publishing is anything but self. You really need a team. You need people to help you with your editing and your proofreading and your book design and your cover. And then you might want help figuring out how to get it to market. Do you want to do print on design? Do you want to, or print on demand? Do you want to do offset printing? And then of course, when Tony was talking about getting a launch team together and having people help you to get the word out about your book. So the self-published model, what it really means is it's the entrepreneurial model where you're going to take charge of your own process. It's much faster. The traditional model is usually several years, whereas the self-published model, somebody could get their book done in a matter of months. I've heard people, Steve Scott, who I've interviewed before on a publishing summit, he was getting out a book. There was a year he was getting one book out every 3 weeks. So his production schedule was really, really tight. And he's an entrepreneur, and so he makes his money through his writing, and so that production schedule was really important to him. On the survey, the self-published authors were the happiest group, and I think that was because they felt like they had the most control over who was on their team and what pace they were going at. So I thought that was actually really uplifting to me because I think that a lot of people are moving towards self-publishing and it's becoming a much more acceptable model. I think 10, 15 years ago, it was not seen as being as mainstream, but now people like Stephen King are self-publishing and it's totally acceptable. You just have to make sure you have a quality book when you put it out to market. I'm still on secret number 2, understanding the basic publishing model or the players in the publishing model. And the most complex one, I say for last, that's hybrid publishers. And hybrid, I think, is not the best name either. Like I said, self is anything but self. And hybrid isn't really hybrid in that you don't take like a white flower and a red flower, mix it together, get a hybrid and it's pink. You don't mix traditional and self and get hybrid. It's actually a totally separate animal. What hybrid publishers really are to me is they are publishing services companies. So I think of them as kind of consulting firms. And so they would give you a proposal and they would say, okay, aspiring author, this is how we're going to work for you. You're going to pay in. So it's an author subsidized or author invested model where the author pays a lump sum usually or pays through payment plan. And the hybrid publisher then takes care of the steps of book development, gets your book to market, and sometimes, depending on the contract, will help with the follow-up with the launch, the marketing, and publicity of the book. And so what I noticed from the survey results is that, were the hybrid published authors happy? Were they unhappy? What did I see there? And it was the opposite of a normal distribution. There was like two humps of, really happy people over here clustered and then really unhappy people in the hybrid published model. So what that told me as I went through the comments of the survey is that it came down again to the contract and what the publishing services company or hybrid publisher was doing for them based on what they promised. So if you're thinking about using a hybrid publisher, I have some great suggestions. If people have questions at the end, or I've done a lot of research on this part of the market, and there are some really good ones out there. And there are some really bad ones out there, so those ones to avoid. So again, this is about the secrets to making publishing fun. And so one of those would be to make sure that you get the right partner when you sign up for your publishing model. And then the last secret is that you really need to build community. So I was saying with the self-publishing model, it's anything but self. You're working with members on your team to get your book done. Tony was talking about the importance of having a launch team and having people help you. You really want to start building that community early on. And so that's people in the publishing industry, but also other authors. Having a support group is really important. And I do a couple of publishing classes, and I always do my classes in cohorts. So like last summer, I had a Make Publishing Fun, get to know the industry cohort, and everybody supported each other, and we put people into masterminds and accountability groups, and that is so helpful because a lot of times writing can be, whether, Tony was talking about doing it at a cafe or at home, a lot of times it's seen as somewhat of a solitary activity, but really the whole process, if you look at it, if you zoom out and look at your publishing journey and how you're going to make it fun, it's about creating a community that supports your publishing and it supports your writing. And so building that community now, starting day one, is really important. So I have that at Make Publishing Fun. You can go to makepublishingfun.com. I've got some resources there. At Make Everything Fun, which is the parent organization, I've got a Facebook group where a lot of authors are in there. There's also IBPA as a community that I recommend. It's the Independent Book Publishers Association. A lot of authors join that as well. And then the nonfiction, if you're a nonfiction writer, which I think a lot of us are, because that helps us, as Tony was talking about, the back end. Speaking around nonfiction tends to be a little bit more connected to what you do, whether you're a consultant or a coach. The nonfiction is really a great kind of back of the room kind of thing that you can offer to your audience. And so the Nonfiction Authors Association, which is run by Stephanie Chandler, is another one of my great community resources. In fact, while I'm on that, Stephanie just offered my audience, which is you, a free gold pass to the upcoming Nonfiction Authors Association conference. It's a virtual conference. The keynote speaker is Gretchen Rubin, who wrote The Happiness Project, and she has people on there all the time that are just incredible people in the industry, and the passes are expensive. So there's if you go to makeeverythingfun.com, and I'll just make sure it's right there, and makeeverythingfun.com, and under blog, if you click on blog, and on that first page, just scroll down to win a gold access pass to the NFAA Writers Conference. All you have to do is post a comment, and it puts you in the random rotation. I think we're gonna do it in mid-April, and we're gonna select one person to get a free pass to the conference, a virtual pass, and then another person will get a free membership to that tribe. So again, this third secret is about building community. There's lots of ways to do it. We can do it here too on this group. We can put information into the chat and stay in touch with each other. I can't tell you again how important it is to have support industry-wise, publishing industry-wise, but also author-wise. And, you know, fiction authors can support nonfiction authors. Children's books authors can support different kind, you know, genres can be interrelated because the process of the publishing journey is very much parallel. Let's see, I want to wrap up soon, but there's another thing I wanted to offer everyone because it's really exciting. I mentioned a couple of cohorts that I've done. I have a course called the introductory course, which is about becoming the fast track to becoming an industry expert. And for Tony's audience for today, I'm going to offer everybody that for free. There are 2 modules and 8 lessons that will walk you through what we just talked about, that observing, orienting, deciding, and acting, and really diving deeper into how the publishing industry works. There's videos, there's audios, there's downloadables, and that is all available at the special link that I created for Tony. It's makepublishingfun.com/Tony. So it's really easy, even if you're out listening to the replay, if you're walking, washing the dishes, whatever, that's an easy link, makepublishingfun.com/Tony. And what that has, again, is 2 modules, and each module has 4 lessons. So there's 8 lessons total, and it walks you through what I talked about with the author survey, the survey results, the actual quotes from authors, and then what you should do about how you yourself should observe, orient, decide, and act. And I also wanted to read a quick quote from the survey, so it'll kind of whet your appetite for how important it is to build a community. So this is from an author in the survey. And he or she said, "One cannot be successful if doing it alone. It would take mega amounts of time investment to learn what one needs to learn and then to master it in order to have minimal success." So this was, you could tell, a frustrated author that had spent a lot of time, probably a lot of money, and in the survey results, it shows you by publishing model how much everyone spent on each stage of the process. So this was not just a really light survey that people filled out. It took about an hour for people to do it, but everyone got the results, and they were really happy to be able to say, okay, you know, if I was a traditionally published author, did I get a fair advance? Like, I want to know. I want to be able to compare. And if I was a self-published author, were my book sales where they should have been based on how much money I spent on my marketing and publicity? So again, one cannot be successful if doing it alone. And that is why we've all gathered here today for this wonderful conference that Tony's putting on. So sending everyone tons of gratitude that we're all here together. And I really do hope that you go and you take me up on the offers to get the free modules, as well as the author survey results. And check out makepublishingfun.com in general. So Tony, we can see if there's any questions.
Okay, if you do have any questions, be sure to unmute yourself or comments or anything you want to say. We want to hear from you. Catherine, that was amazing, wonderful, useful information, and I really appreciate you participating. So, oops, let me get rid of this because that can be annoying. Sorry. Anyone have any questions or comments?
I would love to speak, if I may. It's
yes,
Susie.
Please.
Susie Briscoe. Catherine, that was just awesome. I found it compelling listening to you. And there are so many points that you made there that are so valid for all of us would-be authors. And thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Susie. And what I love so much about it, it was really fun to start out with that, like, with Tony's 11 tips and get started and rah-rah and energy and momentum. And I love that because I'm a real action-oriented person. I think everyone here is. And then this was kind of fun to sort of like zoom out a little bit and then take in the big picture. Not that we're not going to still act, but it's just, it's from a different level. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Gary, did you have a question? No. All right, sounds good. I'm gonna
say something.
Oh, Rhonda, hey.
I had to run out, but I heard everything. I loved your stuff. You know what was really exciting to me is everything had a link that said fun in it, and you were talking about the fun because we get so scared in our head that it made me smile. And so I appreciate you in being able to take a process that's really intense, as Tony did the 11 steps, and then you talking about the 3 areas of how to look at publishing. So the fun helped me like relax as I was listening to the details. Yeah, this is supposed to be fun. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you so much. It is a lot of work. Anything that we put so much time and effort to, we have to find the fun in there. I mean, I work also in an innovation center, which is a center for entrepreneurs in Sun Valley, and I deal a lot with entrepreneur burnout, and that goes for authors and writers as well. We have to be always on the lookout for burnout. And what I've found, and believe me, I've hit rock bottom. When I was in management consulting, I knew the absolute meaning of burnout, like in the fire. And the antidote that I've seen work over and over and over again is to inject some fun into everything that we're doing. So I'm not saying that every minute's going to be easy and that you're not going to feel really uncomfortable. In fact, you should feel uncomfortable, and we should start to think that being a little bit uncomfortable is fun, because guess what? That's where the growth happens. The growth doesn't happen in the comfort zone. It happens in the discomfort zone. So let's go, ooh, I'm so happy to be in my discomfort zone because I'm growing.
Absolutely. Let me interject really quickly here, because there's something that just sort of hit me. For anyone who is working on a book or has a book that's coming out, one of the lessons that I learned is that your writing becomes progressive. The more you do it, the better hopefully you get at it. I read a lot of my earlier work, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is absolute shit. What was I thinking? You know? And you know, I read a lot of my work now, and I'm going, okay, that was really well written. I like that. You know, and of course we are our own worst critics. But don't worry if the first thing that you write isn't absolutely brilliant. It doesn't have to be brilliant. One of the sayings that I use, or phrases that I use, is, you know, we're perfectly imperfect. We learn, we make mistakes, we grow, we get better at it the more that we do it. So don't beat yourself up if it isn't perfect the first time out. You know, just keep that in mind. But Catherine, that was amazing. But,
and I just have to say, Tony, I agree. Like, if I go back to my very first book, I went, ooh, gosh, I could have done this, I could have done that. And yes, so don't worry about perfection. And that leads me to one other thing before we wrap up that I can offer people. So I wrote a book about the publishing industry. It's called Look Before You Leap. The Smart Author's Guide to Avoiding the Money Pit and Finding Financial Success in the Industry. It's at Amazon. And here's the thing, is you don't have to buy the book. If you just look inside the book, there's a link. If you like Audible or audiobooks, you can just go, like, look inside the book, and there's a link there, and it gives you the book for free in its audio version. And I thought of that because that was my 4th book. And going back to what Tony said, I thought the writing was better than my first book, and it's a lot shorter. It was like 10,000 maybe words versus my first book was like 50,000 words. So it's like, I'm going to back what all these talks will be really complementary and will add to your experience, because what Tony was saying about, breaking up your books and making them smaller and more bite-sized, I think is really great. And it took me 4 books to figure that out. So that was in Look Before You Leap. And if you listen to that book or take a look at it, it's some of my better work because it's some of my more recent work. So don't worry about if it's your first book.
Absolutely. And again, and I cannot stress this enough, you're not always going to get it right the first time. That's the reason why you sort of learn and you grow and you say, you know what, I wish I had done XYZ, but see, now you know not to do that next time, and you turn out a better product. People will be a little bit more receptive to it, and so that's what it's all about. So I appreciate that. Any other comments or questions before we move on? Yes, no, maybe? Okay. Sounds good. Catherine, wonderful, wonderful. Please stick around because I want to do the roundtable with everyone. So I've got some questions for all of you. So please stick around until the end if you can. So I'm going to